Well, good evening, everybody. It's so good to see all of you. We really appreciate your time and dedication to this work. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Just a reminder, because it's been a couple weeks and everybody had Thanksgiving and might have forgotten from the post-turkey. My name is Ellen Mejia Hooper. I'm the Director of Facilities Planning and Construction. I have with me additional district representatives, Louis Fries and Melissa Payne, as well as Tim Haley, who's helping with this process. And tonight we are on our third prioritization committee meeting. And so without further ado, unless Louis, you have...
No, I think we're good to get rolling.
All right. So our overall agenda today, our main goal is to select which criteria will be used in the prioritization, and we're shooting for 15 or less. And you'll see that our first round of elimination got rid of a good chunk of them, but we're probably not down to that 15 number, so we're going to have to work on that. And discuss some of the metrics for the new ones. We'll start off with a little bit of an introduction, but then I will move us into the discussion items, which is really going over finishing that first round of criteria, removing or consolidating the remaining criteria, and discuss metrics. And then, like we said, at the end, we will have public comment for our two public attendees, which we are happy to have. So overall, the role of the committee is to update the criteria that will serve as the basis for the priority sites and the sequencing of funding. And it is not specifically to talk about any particular site. Over on the right, you'll see the list of the members of the committee. I know we've had some questions about releasing the names of those members. The members who have attended are listed on our meeting notes. Any other adults representatives, we will release their names. However, if a student has not attended, we will not be posting their names. Because it's within their rights to attend and let themselves be known, but otherwise we don't feel comfortable moving forward with that. Speaking of the meeting minutes, everybody on the committee should have received the draft of the first two meeting minutes. We did not post those to the website. However, we will after this meeting, and as long as we confirm that no comments are desired by the committee members. So if anybody had a chance to review the meeting minutes and has any concerns or proposed changes to them, if you would let us know now. Seeing none. Does anybody else see any hands up?
I don't see any hands up.
Okay. All right. So we will determine that those meeting minutes are final, and we will post them to the website. If you haven't been to the website, we have created a page for the prioritization committee. So this is the main website, district website. If you scroll down, there is a prioritization committee button. And here is the prioritization committee. It gives a little component about the role of the committee, as well as who's the type of representation we have on the committee, the next meeting dates. We did post the video and the presentation from the first two. We will add the main notes now to the bottom of this. We also have this historic reference document. So the original 2016 facility master plan is listed here, as well as the seismic reports and the assessment reports that we talked about at the last meeting. So this has been added here, and this was sent, the link to this page was sent out in an email to the committee members So hopefully you guys found those resources useful. Moving back to the presentation, don't forget the norms of the committee. We are all working towards a common goal here. And while we want robust conversation, make sure that we keep it balanced and safe and respectful. We will have public comments at the end of the meeting. So this is what we discussed last meeting. We had these 3 original charts. We talked, the scoring on these charts were off of the Padlet that was released to the committee originally. So these voting numbers were what the committee members had chosen. The last chart had the lowest scores as far as more people giving thumbs down versus thumbs up. We discussed getting rid of all of these proposed criteria except for the 2 that the committee recommended keeping as additional discussion items. So the size of the multipurpose room and the age of schools. We have not discussed yet. We did discuss this first section as well as this section up here, but we had not gotten to this last group or these 2. So that's how we would like to kick off this particular meeting. And we got a comment. Don, would you like to make a comment
Absolutely,
or ask your
yes.
question?
No, yes, because at the last meeting, and I believe at the meeting before, we talked about, at least I know I did, sending this information out in advance so that we could review it in advance and that we would have hard copies that we could actually look at. Because right now, for instance, I'm looking at your presentation and it only takes up about 55% of my screen. If I bring out my magnifying glass, I can probably read some of the text. But if I had it sent out in advance, I could pull it up as the PDF and fill the screen to be able to actually read it. But I could also come in prepared to make comments so that we're not having to try to read it and listen to the presentation at the same time. This would be very helpful if we could actually send the material out in advance. Thanks.
And it was sent on Monday morning.
By who?
By me. I sent it from my email.
Well, I will recheck that then. I apologize if that was the case.
All right, we tried to get it, the holiday made it a little weird, but we tried to get it out as soon as we could. But we wanted to give the other members time, and you'll see later where they were able to add additional input. So, but I am making these bigger. So the next group of items that we still need to go through for our first round of elimination are the ones highlighted in red. And so when we go to the next slide, these are the ones highlighted in red. So hopefully, Dawn, that's bigger for you. So what we're doing here is we're trying to figure out which criteria, these criteria were, the yellow were originally the criteria from 2016. The ones in white are the criteria that were suggested by the community through the community survey recently. So what we're doing is we're going through and we're discussing each criteria for its merits on whether we think it should remain as a criteria or be added as a criteria or if it should not. Our overall goal is to get to 15 criteria. We have already in the first round said 16 of them are in good possibility of keeping. So we are going to have to work on whittling it down a bit more, but this is the first round to discuss whether these are valid. And once we have the discussion about all the items, we'll go through and do a polling, and you'll be able to vote whether you want to keep it or add it as a criteria or remove it from consideration. Okay, so is everybody clear on what we're doing? Any questions on what we're doing? Okay, seeing none, let's start with the first one. So eligibility for state funding was an original criteria from 2016. There is a state matching fund that you have to qualify for, the school site has to qualify for based on how old the school site is or how much student growth it has. However, this is currently overdrawn, so more people have applied, more school districts around the state have applied for it than money available. So there is not currently money available. However, the state has renewed it by statewide bonds quite a few times over the years. So there's a potential that this might come back eventually. So that's the background on it. Does anybody have any comments on whether we should consider this as a criteria or not?
So at this point, there's no school that can apply, and there's no way to apply for the state for any of this matching funds?
We can still apply, they're just not issuing any money out because the account is empty. But we can still apply and get in line, and we land in what they call the unfunded list.
I would move to put this in one of the criteria to remove.
Okay, any other comments on this particular one?
I just
I'll
wanted
agree
to
100%.
clarify.
Yes, Danielle, and then I'll get to you, Dawn.
Okay, so when it says eligible for state funding, does that mean, I understand that there's no money in the pot right now, but are they saying that some of our schools are eligible for it and some aren't? Or is it, I'm not sure what that eligible part means.
Correct. So you have to meet certain criteria to be able to apply for the money, and it depends on what previous work has been done at the school site, how old it is. There's a list of things that we have to fill out to be able to apply for the funding. So some schools do and some schools don't. However, it also can be distributed across high school feeder patterns, so it gets a little wonky on that front.
And
there's some schools. And there
Sorry,
would be
just real
some
quick.
schools that have already, I'm sorry, there would be some schools that have already applied for state funding and have utilized the eligibility that was available for that school site. So it's a little bit of complicated about how that formula works out.
Yeah. Well, I guess, yeah, it seems like if there's no money, it doesn't make a lot of sense to keep that as a priority. But I mean, I'm curious if the school district is going to apply for the state funding if we don't keep it as a criteria.
All right,
So,
Don, you had a
Yes,
comment?
I do. I mean, as I understand it, the goal of the facilities master plan is to rank the schools so we prioritize the schools that need assistance from the bond program, ahead of others. Okay, and whether we use our bond funds or we're able to get funds from the state or some generous anonymous donor, that's all inconsequential. We're still just ranking the schools. I would not want to exclude any school because we've applied for money that may or may not exist in the future. So I say that this should just disappear, never to be even considered again. I agree with Jose completely.
Okay, any other comments on this one? Seeing none, like I said, we will vote for all of them in one chunk. So we're going to go through and talk about each one, and then we'll vote on the whole chunk together, okay? So the next one is percent of enrollment of ESL foster youth or low income. So this is our unduplicated LCAP count. So as you may be aware, the LCAP is the local control accountability plan, and it distributes more operational money to schools depending on how many students are English language learners, foster youth, or low income, but it doesn't affect the facility money. However, there was an idea in the last prioritization committee. They wanted to be able to give some higher ranking to schools that had a larger group of this population than the others to promote equity. So that was the previous committee's thoughts on including this particular item. And so I'll open this one up for discussion. Right, seeing no discussion.
I'm sorry, my hand was,
sorry.
my hand
Yes,
was up.
Don?
I'm sorry. I was trying to be polite. I have a problem with giving any school special consideration, based on flatlands versus hills, ethnicity, rich or poor, or anything like that. That's discrimination one way or the other. You're giving favoritism to one school. It means you're taking something away from other schools because they may not have that special circumstance. I like equal rights. I want to make sure that all of our schools, all of our students, all of our parents, all of our communities are all looked at through the same lens. So I'm just not in favor of special considerations like this.
And I would say that one of the indicators of student success is being proud of the school they're at. So I think this goes to the point of the broken window argument. Some of the schools that are in this population's area do have that broken window view where it just seems to, students don't want to go to a place that looks not welcome. So I think it's very valid for our communities.
Yes, Daniela?
Yeah, I mean, I would also argue that this is a good indicator or, criteria to consider given, I mean, I think I've heard that other schools in communities that have had more income have often been improved earlier than others because their neighborhood has more money or they've got local bonds that have paid for improvements. So, I mean, I feel like, for equity reasons, it would be one criteria to consider. So I support this as being one of the criteria.
I'm sorry, I look at the schools, I've been with the bond program since 1998, and I look at most of the schools that have been rebuilt, and they've been rebuilt for a reason. I mean, El Cerrito High School was one of the first and biggest, the Taj Mahal, and one of the reasons that it was on that list was because the school was in such bad physical shape that the only people allowed in the buildings were district staff and the students. Even the parents could not go in the buildings at the time because our legal department says the risk was too high. When you looked at Perry's Elementary School, they would with holes in the roof with the rainwater coming through. When you had looked at Coronado and others, these schools were falling apart. They were falling down. It had nothing to do with rich or poor on this. Pinole Valley High School was falling down. Pinole Middle School was falling down. It just didn't have anything to do with any of the criteria mentioned here.
Odessa?
I have to agree that I think that this is valid for consideration as a metric. I don't think that considering this as a metric has in any way discounts consideration of the facility or construction or the age of the building in any way, but there should be some consideration at least to balance more construction that has happened in more affluent areas. And I think the discussions that have come up about the lack of windows at Kennedy and Richmond High would not still be in play if they had been rightfully considered sort of the first time around or second time around when these bonds were, funds were being allocated.
All right. Any other additional comment?
Hi, this is Amparo. I think we should keep this criteria. I do see that we are rating the facility as a whole, but we don't, like in the past, we don't know what criteria was being applied. So even though other schools were being improved across the board, I think this is a good criteria to keep all the other ratings in balance.
And I see no additional comment. Let's move on to the next one. So this one, I don't have any history on. It was suggested by community through the survey. Smaller schools, COVID or other concerns, 21st century forecast safety needs is the only additional information I have on this one. So if this is chosen to go forward, we're going to have to figure out what this really means and what metric we'll use to grade it. Karen, your new hand. Go ahead. Karen?
Sorry,
You'll need
I'm
to
working
unmute.
on the unmute part. So
No,
that
not a problem.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
That was my addition. And I'm just a little concerned that I think these were great things we're working on, all of them. But they're all concerns that represent how it was or how it has been up to now. And I'm just a little bit concerned that there might be something we have to take into account based on the predictions that there's going to be a lot, that this virus is only the first, and other kinds of environmental concerns that are being put forward as part of the future that we're going to be living with. And are we putting certain of those things into the game? That's what I meant by that. And in particular, I mean, children learn better in smaller schools. We have these, I teach at Dover, so it's one of the biggest schools we have. And I think one of the reasons people choose charter schools sometimes is because they aren't so giant. So I just think, I mean, it's a whole new thing to add to the mix, because having smaller schools and working with what we've already got. So that's what I meant by all that. I mean, I was just like brainstorming, could you have two schools at one site, but they're not counted as, so it's a smaller pod, the whole pod concept.
Mm-hmm. And one thing we've got to keep in mind when we're talking about criteria is a way to talk about choose school A or school B to go first, right? And it's not what we are going to build at school A or school B. So the idea that we may want to look at smaller learning communities or some other way to make larger schools into smaller spaces to improve that community connection. It's totally something we can talk about and look into as we are rebuilding the schools. However, we got to keep in mind that criteria is really meant to judge whether we should put one school before another school. So it's just something to keep in mind as you're thinking about these different ones. We kind of talked about that on the camera front too. is whether security cameras is just something we're hoping will happen in a new construction versus something we might be judging one school over another for. Odessa, I don't know if your hand was still up from the last time or if you had a new comment.
I actually think it's up still from the last time, but I guess to build on what you just said, so in thinking of this criteria, would we think of it as if we're ranking school A versus school B, if school A has a smaller footprint and services a smaller student population, would that be less likely to receive funding than school B if it is a giant school that has a very large student population? Or is that part of what you're saying is some of the how we would have to define the metric?
Well, that's definitely what we would have to do to define the metric. I don't know, Karen, if you had an idea which way was better, like if larger schools would be prioritized over smaller ones or smaller ones over larger ones. I'm not sure which
Capacity question.
which direction, although we do have several criteria that already are addressing capacity.
I just brought it up because the first time we met was right in the middle of shall we open the schools at all and everything, and I just thought it needed to be on the table. I mean, it could be whether schools are divisible, whether there's a school that would work well divided into two or something, but I didn't have an idea. No, thank you.
Okay.
Dawn,
and then Jose, you were after Dawn.
Thank you. Yeah, the past month or so, we've been discussing at the board meetings the design standards that were adopted by the board. I think that this is the kind of thing that falls under that criteria. You're deciding how big a school gets built, whether it gets split into multiple pods or whatever. I'm not sure that it actually applies and belongs here on the facilities master plan. And so I would advocate not keeping it.
Jose?
So I'm going to say that I like this line. If we can strike out the small school part, the reason is because of the fire staff coming in, and because of the COVID, and also a need to do a forensic study of the schools. I think that looking at 21st century safety needs are very important. Because some schools are not as safe as others related to how our world is changing, especially for some of the schools that are closer to areas that are closer to any fire hazards. The fires did create a lot of havoc for our schools. And even the power outages, there were schools that were built in such a way that a power outage is less intrusive than others.
Right, and I was just flipping to this other slide because these are the other criteria that are still in consideration. So it may or may not work better associated, the thing that you're talking about, Jose, might be better associated with the things about lack of windows or air conditioning or some of these ventilation components. So that's just a consideration when you're deciding, because right now this really is looking at that smaller school component.
So like I said,
but it's up to, yeah.
Like I
It's
said,
up to everybody to decide.
Yeah. My comment is related to the description that as things change in our world, blackouts, fires have not been an issue for people that have been in the district for more than 5 years. This is a whole new world with those things. And if we're saying
Any
that
other comments on this one?
if it's been addressed later, it's fine.
Okay. Just making sure we don't have any new comments before we go back to somebody who's made a comment. Okay. Go ahead, Don.
I agree with many of the things that Jose was saying about the needs to look at the safety considerations. And I'm not talking about gang violence or something like that, but like you said, fires and smoke and COVID and such. Those are things that we should consider, and that should be included on the list. But that is irrespective of the size of a school, whether it's an El Cerrito or Pinole Valley High School, or it's a small little mom and pop elementary school. Yeah, these are same kind of concerns that need to be looked at on all of our facilities. But again, irrespective of the size.
Okay. And then Karen, do you still have your hand up accidentally, or do you have another comment?
My hand is up out accidentally, but I agree with what Jose said about take out smaller schools and just move 21st century concerns into a category. And I'll take
Okay.
my hand down.
All right. All right, so moving on to the next one is percent of Black/brown youth. Is there a discussion on this one? Okay.
Could we consider,
It was
sorry,
go ahead,
raise
please.
my hand, sorry. Could we consider consolidating this with the percentage of enrolled ESL, foster, and low-income youth?
Yes, that's what I was just kind of thinking, is that the discussion probably has already been had, because those two are for better or for worse related in the demographics. And so that if both of them survive this process, then we can definitely discuss combining them in the next process. Don, and then is it Stephanie? So let's do Don and then Stephanie.
I know that today I'm going to become a very unpopular person, because I actually believe in equal rights, that every student is treated the same, irrespective of the color of their skin, their ethnicity, their socioeconomic status, their sexual orientation, or anything else. Equal rights is equal rights. And I don't like discriminating for one group against at the expense of any other group.
All right, and Stephanie?
I kind of have to somewhat agree with Don right there. I'd rather remove the Black and brown youth. I like addressing the needs of our students, so I'd keep the needs of ELs compared to our foster, low income, or homeless youth, but the need to categorize our Black and brown youth wouldn't necessarily be the same, because not all students, not all Black and brown youth fall under EL or foster, low income. But just categorizing by race, I wouldn't keep as.
All right. Any other comments on this one?
I don't know how to raise my hand virtually. Cristina here.
That's okay. Yes, go for it.
I just wanted to add to this portion that we do have to take into account that our students are there is data on our students based on being Black and brown when it comes to, for example, formative assessments and standardized testing. So it's just something that I want to put out there. I hear people saying that we do not want to separate students based on those two criteria, but it's something that the state already does.
Just making sure that we, is there anybody who's a first-time commenter? Yeah, you had a comment there. All right, so then we'll do Don and then Stephanie again.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I never said that we shouldn't be looking at a student based on the color of their skin. So we don't look at a school, at a facility based on the color of the skin of, or anything else like that, of the students that attend that school. Because quite frankly, that changes from time to time.
Stephanie?
Sorry, I just want to add, are we also, when we look at the percentage of enrollment, separating the LCAP unduplicated count, also including our SPED students? Just the accessibility of the classrooms within the schools also? Because that's not technically the LCAP. They don't fall under the LCAP unduplicated count, even though we put money aside for them on our committee. But we only just focus on our ELs, our foster and low income and homeless youth, but not necessarily taking into consideration the SPED.
Correct. I don't believe last time we did. We could change that metric though when we get to the metrics discussion, but the previous time we did not include that group. Any other additional comments before we move on to the next one? Oh, we got a Sandra? Sandra?
Yes, hi. I think last time we talked about the ADA as a category, ADA compliance.
So ADA accessibility, yes, we did, and I believe that's still on the list of items to be, let me double check. But yes, ADA compliance is, so, but what ADA compliance is about is whether the building itself is able to support disabilities. So the ADA stands for Americans with Disabilities Act, and it's about whether the building has a ramp that's compliant that allows a wheelchair to easily access the entrance or the restroom, where it's not talking about the number of special ed students. And special ed students a lot of times don't actually have a physical handicap. And so those don't always relate to one another as far as a population. And there's also disabled people who obviously are not special ed. So it's, while there is correlation between the two groups, it's not always the same. But one's really talking about students, which this percent of enrollment's really students. And the other one is talking about whether the building can support access or not.
Okay, so perhaps evaluating whether the classrooms are appropriate for a special ed class.
Yeah, I don't believe that's currently in our, the ADA compliance evaluates whether or not they're accessible for people with disabilities, which a lot of times, and it's physical disabilities, not learning disabilities. So you're looking at, for instance, people in wheelchairs, people with hearing or vision loss. There's a bunch of different building codes that require us to have signage in Braille. And those little truncated domes, that big yellow square that you see every time you go into a parking lot that's all bumpy, those are for the visually impaired. Assistant listening is for the hearing impaired. Ramps and making sure our slopes are okay is for those in wheelchairs or other mobility issues. So that's really what ADA compliance is talking about, is the physical changes that we make to buildings or that we design into buildings and sites to accommodate people who have a physical disability. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I was trying to think about how including the special ed into that criteria V would change.
So we can add the percent of special ed students to that other list as far as ESL, foster youth, and low income, if the committee desires that when we get to the metric stage of the game. Any other comments?
You have one more hand.
Oh,
Vivian?
Vivian?
Yeah, hi. I'm a student, and I wanted to speak about the percent of Black and Brown youth. Myself being a Brown student, I feel like if this wasn't taken into consideration, so like this wouldn't, the criteria was ignored, I feel like I would be ignored because it would be implying that there is no correlation between the percent of people who look like me and who come from similar backgrounds as me, and like someone mentioned, the educational test scores. So I feel like this absolutely should be a criteria and should be acknowledged. Someone mentioned equality, but you know, there needs to be equity, and there needs to be, in some cases, some people need more help than others. And there's a correlation between the people who need help and the color of their skin.
All right. Additional comments on percent of Black and Brown youth? All right. Next one's the lack of covered or enclosed hallways. So this might kind of go towards potentially what Jose was talking about earlier and some of the other committee members. I'm assuming, although this was proposed by the community, that this was related to fires. At least that was what was on the comments in the survey. Yes, Don.
I certainly understand what an enclosed hallway is about, but can you clarify for me what is meant here by cover?
Well, not exactly. I'm thinking that it also has to do with whether there's like rain protection to get from one building to another. But like I said, this was added through the community survey, so I do not have background on what their intent was.
I mean, if we are talking about rain cover, and that's what I thought it might be, but I wanted clarification, then protection against the rain and the enclosed hallways, those are critical factors that should be considered.
Stephanie, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Dawn on that one. My kids attended Chavez, so the 4th through 6th graders would have to kind of run to the cafeteria in order to get food because there's no covering out in the portables. And there's quite a few schools like that in the Richmond and San Pablo. And I know there's some in El Cerrito and like Pinole area. So a lot of schools that still are older models, our kids still have to run through the rain to get to the cafeteria or whatever other room they may need to access.
Sandra?
Yeah, I agree. I think both rain access and then the enclosed hallways has to do with, you know, there's kids can't get to the lunchroom when there's smoky air or the bathrooms because there's no enclosed hallways.
Additional comments?
Jose?
Jose?
Yep, and also just like to take this enclosed hallway the other way as far as safety. There are some schools that are completely enclosed, so once smoke gets in the building, it doesn't leave. Yeah, it's like an airplane, recycled smoke.
Fair enough. Additional comments? Okay, moving on to the next one. We have proximity to public transportation. Yes, Don.
I mean, it's important for the kids to be able to get to school. That's for sure. I advocate for going back to school buses, picking up the kids in front of their house or at the street corner. I know that's not going to happen though, but we're only talking about buses here. BART really doesn't apply to our students. I mean, you can go from Richmond BART station to, the El Cerrito Plaza BART station, but that's about it. But when you talk about bus routes, I mean, that comes up to AC Transit, and they change all the time. And right now, bus routes are disappearing left and right, and we don't spend mega bucks on a new school based on a route that may disappear before the school is even finished. I just don't believe that this needs to be considered on there. I mean, the school district, the school board needs to advocate with AC Transit to make sure that our kids have buses and bus routes that will serve their needs. But that is irrespective of the facility itself.
So I wonder, sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
You were next.
No. So I know that AC Transit does contact the middle school and the high schools for the start time and end time, so they can try to accommodate to some degree if the bus drops off in front of the school. So it drops off before school starts and picks up after school starts. I would like to hear from the elementaries. How many of our elementary students are bus dependent? A lot of the high schools are bus dependent. There are students that leave at 6 in the morning to get on the bus in Richmond to get up to De Anza or to Pinole. And there are students that get up early to get a bus from North Richmond down to 23rd Street. Just the question is, do elementaries have some of the same bus concerns?
I don't believe that they have the near number of students that rely on buses, just because they are more distributed throughout the district. So they're the commute, as we should say, is not as long to elementary school sites as they are to middle and high. And also, I think there's the parents might ride with students, but it's not the same with high schoolers who ride the AC Transit bus on their own. I don't know if.
I don't know how you measure that.
And also, I would like to, any students on our panel that have any experience with the AC Transit, is that how big of an impediment or roadblock is that to get into school?
Do we have any students on the committee who would like to respond to that?
Hi, I'm a student at El Cerrito High, and I've used the AC Transit bus sometimes. For me, and I think for most students, it's works pretty well. Sometimes it's not always the most reliable, and that's only the main issue that I've had with it.
Don?
I have to ask the question again about whether AC Transit has a good route or has a route at all from where our students are to where the school is. Does this justify building a new school or on the same piece of property, or spending millions or tens of millions of dollars renovating a school on the same plot of land? So the bus routes themselves, again, there's something that I believe that the school district should be working with AC Transit on to make sure that all of our students are being accommodated. But I just don't believe it has anything to do with spending bond money on renovations or replacement of schools.
I would agree that we should put this on closer to the removing list depending on the other criteria.
Very good. All right, number of outdoor learning environments. So this again is a community one. I don't know if it means the more outdoor learning environments they have, the better or the worse. But that is the criteria to be discussed. Don?
Yes, thank you. Once, I'm befuddled on this one. I'm not quite sure what is meant by outdoor learning environments. I mean, if we're talking about walking through Wildcat Canyon, that's definitely an outdoor learning environment. But on our campuses themselves, do we really hold classes outdoors all that often, or are we just talking about physical education classes? I'm confused on that. So maybe somebody can help unconfuse me if that's possible.
Yeah, and this is going to be a complicated one, determining what classifies as an outdoor learning environment, because there are quite a few different approaches to outdoor learning environments, whether they're, just a bunch of benches outside that can be used, whether it's actually trying to do experiments. So there's all sorts of different definitions of outdoor learning environments. So it definitely would be one that would require extensive definition. Sandra, I saw your hand, and then Karen.
This isn't mine, and I'm not sure if I agree with it, but I think it has to do with sort of the era of COVID. Once things came up, people started talking about how to do outdoor classes, things like a school garden. I'm sure some schools have smaller plots of land or smaller footprints, so they can't have any outdoor classes. But again, I don't know if that's something that we would put in here or just bump it into the 21st century concerns.
Karen?
I think it's really important. I didn't even think of it in the COVID point of view. I just was thinking students need fresh air and connection to the earth. And I work at Dover, which is one of the schools that's been redone, and it has a native plants garden, and it also has a covered work area so students can be near the garden even if it's raining or if it's really hot. And it has a community garden. It has it could have more, but it's an example of something that's really good for everybody, for the health of the community, that there's places to go outside and learn, and nutrition program and gardening program and community interaction. So, I mean, schools that don't, I guess maybe it connects more to the design element, designing that in, than it does to this, but I definitely think it's important.
Yes, and as John mentioned before, as we're looking at the educational specifications, which is what we use to actually design schools, we've definitely been exploring more of what outdoor learning environments can be, and trying to make sure that we have those opportunities in our new construction projects. So on the design side, we are working on it and we're aware of it. Celeb?
Hi, good evening. I'm a mentor at Helms Middle School, and I was kind of excited to see that on here because there was a new teacher who came on before all this happened with all the pandemic and whatnot. And this teacher was bringing the students out and sitting around the tree to do classwork outside. And I had one of my students who was having a hard time staying in class. And when she started doing that, he actually was participating more in class and doing classwork. And there was something about being outside that really brought some like calmness to the class when there were, when it was like a nice hot day and whatnot, and to see that. So we definitely would like to see more of that. And also I wanted to bring something up that I never really see much in this district. I worked and born and raised in San Francisco. And one of the things that I don't see much is murals in schools. Sometimes I walk through the hallways like Kennedy, Helms, and Richmond High, and it kind of reminds me of the movie Matilda. I don't know if anyone's ever seen it, and reminds me of the principal, Miss Trunchbull. Like, she didn't want to see no color. It just gives me the vibe of that. And I just wanted to see if there was anything more that we can do as far as bringing murals into our schools, you know, putting up images of, I don't know, Rosie the Riveter, and I don't know, I mean, kind of cool to have some pride in the city that these kids, I don't know, just see some color, some murals in the schools, I think would be something to talk about as well.
Right. And we're, you know, there's a lot of opportunities to be had in new construction, and all of them are really important and understandable. But we got to make sure we keep our eye on the prize here today, and our goal is to get to how we're going to take this whole list of schools where we know all of them have big needs, right? It's not that any of these schools are undeserving. All of these schools have big needs, and we've got to figure out how we're going to get from having 19 schools that have big needs to figuring out which first projects we're going to tackle. So we want to stay focused on which criteria is going to tell us which schools need to go first and which schools unfortunately are going to have to wait a little longer. So I saw, Don, your hand went up again.
Yes, it did. I'm sorry. I'm hogging the microphone, I know. Yeah, I agree 100% that murals in our walls are a great idea. It broke my heart when we tore down the great mural on the wall at Woodrow Wilson Elementary School. Okay, but I mean, if we've got an opportunity to take our students outside for classes, that is great too. But those have nothing to do with prioritizing where these schools are on the list of which schools should be rebuilt or renovated before others are. I mean, those are things that should be considered when you're redesigning schools, or when or building the current schools. I mean, even the El Cerrito High School, you're not going to rebuild it for another 75 years, but you want to add a mural, you want to add a tree to it, they can be done right now. But our goal right now is to stay focused on the prioritization of the schools that we have right now and which ones need the attention of our bond dollar. Thanks.
Is that why the yellow was highlighted? Because it's the priority, or we're just going down the list?
So the yellow was highlighted because those are the criteria that were used in 2016. Okay. So now, and then we asked the community if they had any other things that they think we should consider, and so those are the white ones, but all of these are criteria. So so we're looking at these as if we should judge one school over another on whether they have more or less of whatever these items are, and whether that gives them more points towards being the first school to be rebuilt or not.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen, are you still, did you have a comment, or is your hand still up? Nope, hand went down. Okay, let's go to the next one. We got to keep moving because we got a lot of things to do still tonight. Size of multi-purpose room. So I'm assuming this would be like the size of the multi-purpose room versus the number of students in the school, something along those lines, but this was a recommendation by a community member, so I do not have history on it. Yes, Don?
I think that multi-purpose rooms, for obviously by their name, they take on so many different roles at our schools, and particularly the elementary schools and the middle schools. But the size is critical, because one of the things we forget is a lot of principals, they decide that multi-purpose means storage. So we've got the size of the room itself becomes smaller and smaller on the inside. And so we need to make sure that that the schools have a multi-purpose room that fits the needs of the size of the student population. So I think this was a critical one for keeping on the list.
Additional comments?
I have a question
Odessa.
about this one. In the instance of the school that my son goes to, the Mandarin school, there is no multi-purpose room. So how would this be considered in that respect when there's a lack of? I don't know if there are other schools that actually lack multi-purpose rooms, but Don has made a good point that the multi-purpose rooms serve a lot of functions. If there are schools that lack this room at all, I think that should be a high consideration.
Right, and that one actually technically had a multi-purpose room. It just was multi-purposed out. But I don't believe there are any others, but it would be one of those things where on other criteria, what we've done is it's not like an all or nothing. We make 10 points for every criteria, and so it's not an all or nothing, it's a range. So it would probably be one of those things where there's a range of, you know, how many square feet per student there is, and the one with the least would be the 10 points, and then it would go down from there. So that's how it technically would work as far as not having one. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's helpful.
Jose, I noticed you physically raised your hand, but you didn't virtually.
Yeah.
So did you have a comment?
No, anybody from elementary, and I know that middle schools and elementary schools, the multi-purpose room, most of the time it's also the cafeteria with some type of small stage for assemblies. If they have any comments from the elementary schools, thank you for the Mandarin school comment. Or anybody else from elementary that would like to comment on the multi-purpose room.
Do we have somebody who would like to respond to that before I get to Don? I see you. I just didn't want to ignore you.
You want me to talk now?
No? Yep, go for it.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate Odessa's comments about the Mandarin School, and I'm going to bring this up again, that sooner or later, the district has to decide, what are we going to do about the Mandarin School? We can't just keep them in a temporary campus or that really doesn't suit anybody's needs except the adult school. Before we can put them on any kind of a ranked list, we have to have, in my opinion, we have to have a facility to be considered, because we just cannot continue to treat the Mandarin School. If we're going to keep the Mandarin School, we can't continue to treat it as the redheaded stepchild. It deserves the full attention of the district and of the board and of the taxpayers. So we need to do something about it, because we're going to run into these kind of comments time and time again as we were talking about this, because they apply.
Okay. All right, we've got one more, and I'd really like to finish the voting before our time's up. So can we move on to age of school? This one is the original school building on site. So it's not the amount of time that the school has been open or in existence, but actually the physical buildings on site. Any comments?
So, I was racing with Don to get my hand up.
Too late.
Oh. Would you like to concede to Don?
Yes, I will concede to Don.
Well, I thank you very much. I trained to be on Jeopardy, hitting that button real quick. I think this is a critical concern. I mean, I look at my list right now. Stige Elementary School, 77 years old. Highland, 62 years. Valley View, 58 years. Grant, 64. I mean, even Richmond High School and Kennedy High School, my alma mater, 52 years old. Yeah, age makes a big difference. Because guess what? These schools do not get better with age, especially when you ignore the maintenance, as we are so fond of doing. We've got to take care of our schools, but that's neither here nor there tonight. You've got to look at the age, because these schools, I mean, walk around Stige Elementary School. It's scary to see how much exposed asbestos is there because of 77 years of abuse on the linoleum tiles. So absolutely, you've got to consider the age of the school. Now your turn, Juan.
Yeah, so it's along with age, also I would look at going back to the modern concerns, making sure that age has to go hand in hand with modern concerns that we have, to be the COVID, the fires, and air circulation in the buildings. And also for the schools that need the AC in those hot summer days that we get.
All right. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to open the poll. Maybe. So we are, this is not the right one. I'm sorry. Just a second. End poll. We want polling. This one. Yes. All right, here we go. So these are the 10 or the 9 that we just went over. So you vote yes, you would like to keep it as a criteria. No, you would not like to keep it as a criteria, or abstain. And we have a bunch of people in the chat.
So
Can you read the chat?
It says host and participant can't vote.
Uh-oh. Okay. Let me try editing. Can you clarify what abstain means? Can you look up?
Abstain is a no vote?
It said panelists can't vote, not participants can't vote.
We're all panelists.
Right.
She's making the corrections.
And Louis, you will probably have to do what we did last time with me. If you call off the letter number, I'll give you my vote.
Sure.
Well, you should be able, we did not promote you to co-host this time, I don't think.
Okay, then I'll give that a try.
How about now? Can you guys vote now?
No.
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 Okay.
Hosts and panelists cannot vote.
Okay.
I can vote. I voted. I'm on number 2. So I pressed the yes, and then it took me to number 2, and then it said I can go back to previous or next. So I was able to vote. And when you took
shoot.
it,
Okay, so I didn't, let me relaunch then. I'm sorry, I'm gonna cancel your vote, but just re-vote. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay.
All right, it's working for me.
Okay, good.
Okay.
My voting screen didn't come back up. Am I supposed to? Oh, there it goes. I got it. Thank you. I got it.
No.
The order of the items changed on us there.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, it looks like when I changed, because we had the discussion on smaller schools, I went ahead and added the 21st century concerns. So when I did that, it looks like it flipped it out of order. So I apologize. So we have 17 out of 21. So it looks like we're still missing 4 people.
I'd be one of them, so.
Oh, that's right. The hosts aren't voting. So that's probably everybody. Does anybody need more time? Okay, hearing none, we're going to go ahead and end the polling. And we are going to share the results. And I'm going to quickly add this to our thing here. Do you want to read them off?
What do you want me to read off?
The
Percentages?
results.
So for number 1, for yes is 35%. No is 53.
Oh no, then we'll do the number of votes. So it looks like the first one we had more no's. The no's won with 9. On number 2, we have 13 yes votes, 3 no, and 1 abstain. On number 3, we have 10, 5, and 2. On number 4, we have 9, 7, and 1. Lack of cover has
11, 5, and 1.
11, 5, and 1.
3, 13.
3, 13. 0 or 1?
Yeah.
Oh, we've got to roll down.
1.
1. Okay.
7, 8, 2.
7, 8, and 2. I got to scroll down again.
17. 100%.
Is that the size of multi-purpose room?
Age of school.
Age of school. 7.
17.
17. Oh, people like that one. Oh, everybody liked that one. That was an everybody likes that one.
The last one is 11, 4, 2.
11, 4, and 2. All right. So if we go here, all right. So this first group, if anybody missed the last meeting, we sent out a survey to allow them to also vote, since we had quite a few committee members who missed that meeting. And so we had 2 respond. in general, it didn't change any of the members who attended the committee overall results as far as the yes and no's, except for the last two in red, which are right on the border between yes and no, which is the 6 and 5 and the 6 and 6 of the lack of air conditioning and the schools located in temporary facilities. The ones that did not survive the last round of discussion were A, G, and M. When we voted before, we had more no votes than yes votes. So we were proposing to remove these three, A, G, and M, from consideration. Does anybody have an objection to removing A, G, and M from consideration?
Make them disappear.
All right. So hearing none, no objections, we are going to remove those three. We, in our group here, looks like the only one that had more no votes than yes votes. Nope, we have two. We have eligibility from state funding as well as proximity to public transportation. So we had two that were voted down, this particular one.
And AA, Ellen.
Oh, and AA, number of outdoor learning environments. So those three, this round did not survive because of the having more no votes than yes votes. And does anybody have any objection to eliminating those three?
Which three again, please?
It was eligibility for state funding, U, proximity to public transportation, and AA, number of outdoor learning environments.
What's our target number of reduction?
We are looking to get 15 total criteria, so we are way over that. We had 16 in the first column, so even if we eliminated all of these, we were still over 15. So was that an official objection or
No.
just a clarification?
Point of clarification.
Okay. So hearing none, we will eliminate these three. And it looks like we are now basically out of time, and I want to make sure we still make it to public comment. So we do have another meeting scheduled for the Prioritization Committee on December 15th. I think that meeting we will come back and discuss how we can get this down to 15 by either consolidating or deciding that some of these criteria are not applicable or not as high a priority as other criteria. But I do want to make sure that we are still able to get to public comment because we did have 2 public members attend the meeting. And so I want to make sure that we give them a chance to speak. And we will send out this list so that you're able to think about it and potentially check back with the groups that you're representing to be able to have a discussion about what you think is more important or not.
Or some of these items could be consolidated further.
Correct. Because quite a few of them do have overlapping components to them. So.
You do have a couple chat.
Yes.
Chat.
So let me, oh, here's the stop sharing. Yay! Now I have my thing back. So it looks like we had a couple chat pieces about we weren't eliminating the age of school, but there was some comments about similar thinking for multi-purpose room and functionality. So there are some that are overlapping. So, and I believe all the panelists can see these comments, so feel free to read through those. But let us open this up for public comment. Do either one of our attendees have a comment that they would like to make? If you do, raise your hand. Yes. So both of them do. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with Sujin. And you should be able to unmute.
Okay, I think I've unmuted. Can you hear me?
You can, or yes, we can.
Great. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for, I feel like it's so accessible via Zoom, so it's always nice when there's a silver lining to virtual meetings that, you know, it's easier to join, and I appreciate all the thoughtfulness in this. I know it's a tough process. I put a bunch of comments in there about sort of, I think, things that could be combined, which I know is a next step for you. I wanted to flag, there was a little conversation around the percent of Black and Brown youth, and I think I would urge you to keep that as a criteria, or perhaps combine it to like percent of sort of like high needs youth being served. We know that the facilities are really critical for academic achievement, and we think about, you know, promoting achievement of Black and Brown students, English language learners, foster youth, low-income youth. I think we need to think about making sure that they're in facilities that are adequate and safe, and ideally even better than that, but just, you know, beautiful and make someone want to go to school every day. So I think even though it's not about sort of the typical facility type considerations, I think it's important to think about with regards to improving achievement and addressing opportunity gaps in the district. And I also have that question about Brown youth, defining that. So I know there's a lot to be unpacked with sort of how you measure these criteria at some point, but I just threw that out there for consideration. So thank you for all your hard work.
Wonderful. Thank you, and thank you for your comment. All right, and I was remiss, you were well under your 2-minute mark, but I was remiss to not remind committee members that we do have a 2-minute clock. So I will share my screen this time for James, but Sujin was in that 2-minute mark. So I'm going to unmute you, James, and
yeah, thank you for the opportunity to comment. My child is a student at West County Mandarin School, and right now, when start next year, they will have to go to El Cerrito, and only I think maybe I don't have the statistics, but I think not less than half of the student population live in El Cerrito or closer to there. So I hope that also consideration for the Prioritization Committee and the board of, you know, the new coming board, because only Mr. Phil stay, the other board member brand new. So hopefully they will consider the location and for the students, because West County Mandarin unique, the students coming from all over the county. Some live in Hercules, Pinol, and I'm sure you all know about it. The second one also, the temporary location, I would say temporary, is also very close to the PG&E substation. And I'm wondering how many schools in California or in Bay Area that in that close proximity to PG&E substation. So health and safety also has to be put consideration for that. Okay, I'm yielding back. with the 22 seconds left. Thank you.
Thank you, James, for your comments. And thank you again to the community or the committee for attending and participating today. It was so nice to see so many of you here. Our next meeting is the 15th. And it's again at 5 o'clock. Oh, stop. It's again at 5 o'clock with the same Zoom meeting as before. We will update the prioritization page with the 2 meeting minutes that were approved, as well as sending out the criteria that is still under consideration so that you guys can think about it. And we look forward to seeing you soon in 2 weeks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.